welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. I was originally thinking of holding this video like a little closer to when this is relevant, but things are heating up, so I guess it's best that we start talking about it now. But before we get into that, let's stay relevant and get right into the news. First, we're going to start from countries outside of the United States. See how things are holding up in Latin American countries. First, Ecuador. Ecuador did not hold up well because Ecuadorian banker Guillermo Lasso pulled off a surprise win in Sunday's presidential runoff against socialist economist Andrés Arauz, putting the country back on track to maintain open market policies rather than return to socialism. And as such, banking institutions and such have really been cheering, because here's basically what happened. The idea was that, we all remember that there was a guy who was the president of Ecuador by the name of Rafael Correa. He was the socialist leader of Ecuador for a bit. Then he couldn't run again, so he decided to nominate a successor. And that guy, Lenin Moreno, turned out to be a bit more market-oriented and full-on neoliberal. So now, this election cycle, there was a socialist movement outside of the previous party of Correa and Moreno, because they were like, we can't really work with this party anymore because we have Moreno now. Moreno has pretty much tarnished this party, so they started a brand new party. And as you can see, it was able to do well, but it didn't pull off the victory that Ecuador particularly just wanted. Now, there's been accusations by some individuals that this might have been America trying to intervene, but really there isn't any evidence of that at the moment. So it might just be the fact that they just don't necessarily want to return to that variety of socialism, especially considering there were people on the left who even had some sort of hesitancies in returning to that, as this is the thing about Latin American socialist countries. For the most part, they will be a bit bad in certain issues like the environment and such, because a lot of Latin American countries heavily rely on oil or other natural resources to fuel their economies, for lack of a better term. So maybe even some people, they either didn't vote or they just voted for Lasso, because one of the major opponents to Arauz was actually an eco-socialist by the name of Yaku. I can't pronounce his last name. Yaku was an individual who was an indigenous eco-socialist type who actually supported Lasso in the previous election because he was a banker is better than a dictator, which led to some individuals to raise eyebrows at Yaku and his socialist credentials if he's not going to support someone like a Correas, but there might be issues that they might actually have problems with. And hopefully Ecuador is able to figure out these issues come the next election so that we don't have a country fully under neoliberal, neoconservative rule for a million years. Now, another Latin American election that happened around that same time period actually yielded slightly better results. Peru. You see, Peru held their elections around the same time period, and it was the runoff has basically yielded a very interesting result. You see, the two individuals in the runoff are Keiko Fujimori, who is the daughter of an individual who used to be president of Peru, who is basically known as Peru's Pinochet, so it's fair to say where her political leanings lie. But the opponent that got slightly more than her in the original election, and will be her runoff opponent, is an individual by the name of Pedro Castillo. Now, Castillo is not a politician by trade. He's a school teacher and a union leader by trade, who has seen himself as an ally of individuals like Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro. So yeah, it's fair to say while Keiko is the far-right person in the runoff, Pedro is the complete opposite of that. Well, sort of. You see, originally that seemed pretty good, and I was like, oh yeah, cool. While he may be cool on a first glance, there is blind spots, obviously. I'm not disparaging him entirely, but like I said with the previous thing, certain elements of certain figures will not necessarily be at the forefront. While economically he's very far left, he's not left in regards to a lot of social issues. He's basically targeted refugees, well, particularly refugees of Venezuela, telling them that if, refugees come into his country illegally, that he will demand they leave the country after 72 hours. He's also made a stance of, socialist women proposal, which has been described as patriarchal gender normative, which is disguised as I'm liberating the women of Peru. And another issue is, he's not really that good in regards to certain other, he's not good in social issues. He opposes legalization of abortion, he opposes legalization of same-sex marriage, and he opposes the legalization of euthanasia, and he opposes the gender equality approach in education. He's not really, he wouldn't necessarily be considered one of the, maybe the tankies would like him, because the tankies would definitely be more into this, yeah, screw the identity politics. But, he's definitely not really, I personally would not really like him that much. It's good that Peru is moving to the left. It's not, but I'm not necessarily too keen on this particular figure. Maybe down the line, Peru will get someone better. Now, in the next story, let's move to Mexico for a bit. There's been some problems in Michoacan. You see, the state of Michoacan has had kind of a weird thing. I reported not that long ago, if I remember correctly, that Michoacan put the Morena candidate, Raul Moron, off the rolls, and then they put him back on the rolls, but now they're putting him back off the rolls again, so he keeps flip-flopping over, whether Raul Moron will be a candidate in the election for governor of Michoacan. Basically, the issue that happened was that he didn't file in a certain piece of paperwork for his federal, pre-election candidacy, basically his primary candidacy. He didn't properly disclose the finances in the right time period. So, I don't know the specifics, but, I'll explain it like this. The day he was slated to give it in, he did not give it in. He gave it in, a day or two afterwards. And that's why they're not putting him on the rolls. This is sort of the same thing that's happening with Felix, the guy who was accused of raping people. But the reason why was because he had to stop his campaign for a bit and then re-enter his campaign because of the whole allegations that happened against him. Morena saying to the election board, the reason why is because these two didn't start their candidacies until a certain period, so technically it's logical if they didn't file the right times. It seems that Raul Moron is the one that they're fighting for the most, because, Felix's, the reason why he was kicked off the rolls is a bit different. His involved sexual assault allegations, Raul's does not. So Raul is really the only one that they're truly really fighting for. We need Moron to get in. And another reason why they want him to get in is very simple. The number of, I'll be honest, because I keep looking at the data. The numbers of certain gubernatorial races are slightly different than before. Now, you might be wondering, well, why? Because when I was originally talking about the 2021 gubernatorial races in Mexico, it was originally predicted, we'd have, out of the 15 races, only one wouldn't go to Morena. But you see, since all of these things have been happening, more on AMLO's administration happened, now we don't just judge by the parties all running a candidate individually, now we have to run on coalitions, and also we have to run on an individual candidate, because certain candidates will probably do better than others. For example, if, let's say, Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas was running as the candidate for Michoacan under the Morena label, then he would probably be doing really, really well, and they wouldn't really need to even do all this. So yeah, polls have been kind of fluctuating a bit. Morena is still stated to do well, and some of the polls, they keep shifting every so often. So sometimes it'll be a PRI, sometimes it'll be a PAN, sometimes it'll be Morena, sometimes it'll be someone else. But basically Morena's still slated to do really well. But basically this would just determine how big of a divide it will be. Will it be 8 or 7, pretty much? Now, speaking of Latin socialism, now we're gonna go to Cuba, because Cuba is one of the countries that you can't really talk about. If you're gonna talk about Latin socialism, Cuba is one of the countries you gotta talk about. gotta talk about Mexico, you gotta talk about Bolivia, you gotta talk about Venezuela, you gotta talk about Cuba. Those are the ones you gotta talk about. And maybe Brazil. But Cuba is doing something very interesting. Raul Castro is resigning as the Communist Party's leader. Like, he will no longer be their national secretary, which will bring an end to Castro's rule in Cuba. This will be the first time in Cuban history that a Castro is not at the top of the, political ladder. Now, you see, he wasn't really in a die-hard role as leader of Cuba. He had basically delegated all of his, Cuban leadership roles already, because that's the thing that happens. You see, that's what happens in a lot of communist things. Whenever you, pass the torch, doing the actual work, you'll become, a sort of a figurehead leader. Like in the Communist Party of America, Gus Hall, when he got too old, he became, a literal, Communist Party chairman when he was, in his 90s, and then passed on literally, the real work to, someone else. Fidel did it to Raul, and Raul did it to the new guy, Mario, I think his name, Mario something. But basically, this is what he's doing now. He said, we fulfilled our duty, it is time for us to pass the torch and move on to the future of Cuba. Now, this is very interesting for quite a number of reasons, and I think one reason could be a good or bad thing. You see, because if you remember, not that long ago, Cuba had announced that they were going to change some things up a bit. Now they're going to open up the private market a bit. I think this is sort of the beginning of the liberalization of Cuba, and we'll know if it truly is the case if, let's say, if the new guy calls for an election to basically do another term, or something like he opens the door for new parties to form, which is a good and bad thing depending on your viewpoint. Some people may view this as a good thing for Cuba and might be yeah, let's make Cuba a freer nation. However, people who are on the communist side of things might think, no, we've seen this before. When a country like Cuba liberalizes, we're just going to get something bad. That's what happened to the Soviet Union. They started liberalization, and lo and behold, they no longer exist. So they fear that Cuba, especially considering Cuba is sort of known as one of the big socialist hotspots at the time being, their fear is going to be that maybe Cuba might be falling. Now, I don't know. I don't believe Cuba is falling. I believe Cuba's just like many people have stated before. Cuba is just adapting. They're adapting to the modern day, and this is just another step. Now, I've criticized aspects of Cuba, and I've been open about my criticisms of them. Being a one-party state is lame. They've done good things with that one-party state for a decent amount of time, but they also did some crappy things in that one-party state. Every country does. Fidel had a really kind of cringe way of talking about the gay people until the 80s. So, they've had ups and downs. But personally, I think that them adapting into being a bit less like a communist authoritarian regime and being a bit more like a democratic socialist or a social democratic type area, it's fine. The problem is okay, this is good. This is a good place to stop. The problem with what happened to Russia was that they kept going in that direction. It wasn't that they shifted from that to that. It's that they shifted into further down the line. They went from Stalin to Khrushchev to Gorbachev. There was some guy in between. And then, as the epic rap battle stated, I shook hands with both Ronald Reagan and McDonald's. If you just adapt it into a modern day era, then things will be fine. You don't even have to go that far. Maybe just adapt it to something like Bolivia. I'll even allow the Cubans to keep their cult of personality about Fidel up. Fine. We have a cult of personality in Washington and all these other founding fathers. You guys should have a cult of leadership too. As long as that leader is dead and you've moved past that and just look about him as a historical figure, then fine. Okay, so next story, which is somewhat related, but now we're in the US and seeing how they react to other nations. Representative Betty McCollum leads effort to block Israel from using US aid to destroy Palestinian homes. Since 2015, Representative Betty McCollum has been leading congressional critic of Israel's military detention of Palestinian children, introducing multiple pieces of legislation that would bar Israel from using U.S. military aid to arrest Palestinian youth. By targeting Israel's detention of Palestinian children, just one aspect of Israel's military occupation, but one that involved a highly vulnerable population, McClellan was attempting to make her bills appeal to the widest swath of Democrats possible. For most others in her party, the check the U.S. wrote to Israel every year was not up for debate. McClellan is now planning to introduce legislation on Thursday that would bar U.S. aid from subsidizing a wider array of Israeli occupation tactics, an indication of just how far the debate over the U.S. aid to Israel has come over the past 6 years. Now, why would that situation have changed? I can think of two very big reasons, and those two might even be of a broader 6 or 7 or whatever. For all those who like to claim, like, oh, the squad and all these guys are idiots and they don't know anything and blah, blah, blah. These kinds of individuals, they don't understand what they have done for literally the movement of the freaking United States. Our political sphere, like our political spectrum, has shifted to the left. We have a lot of people in Congress who are open socialists. 6 members of Congress right now are openly, or like 7, maybe 7, I don't remember. Danny K. Davis, you really gotta be open with it. I don't know if he is still in DSA or not. I literally just made a video not long ago showing how many socialists were elected to the United States Congress, and 6 of those people are in Congress right now. 7 if you count Danny, I think. But my point is, socialists have never really gotten more than 1 or 2 members of Congress in at a time. The closest we got was like, I think, John Conyers and Ron Dellums and Major Owens briefly overlapped with each other, but then Ron Dellums resigned. I think, I don't know correctly, I could be completely wrong, but certain members of Congress overlap with each other, but those overlaps can literally just be like, I stayed in for a little bit and then I retired that next term. Now, we have many people in office right now that are literally saying socialism. They are socialists. They're saying, like, we want the workers to own the means of production. And in this thing, people like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, they have, and like AOC even, have pushed the congressional debate on the Israel-Palestine situation so drastically. Like, think about it. In 2012, the Democratic Party literally had to quote-unquote Democrat Party, they rigged their election for a specific part of their platform to talk about, like, Israel. It's like so stupid. There was this guy, Antonio V something, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but basically, he was standing there on the stage and was literally saying, hey, do we believe that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel? Aye or no? And a majority of people voted no. He said, let's do that one more time. They said no again. Alright, let's do that one more time. They said no again, and he said, well, the vote passed. That's how much the Israeli debate has changed. Now that can almost never happen. Now individuals who are claimed to be anti-Semitic cannot just be claimed to be anti-Semitic. They actually have to give some sort of actual statements to back up their claims. Like, there was a bill that it of course failed, sadly, where it was like, do we believe that BDS should be do we condemn BDS? It passed, and it passed, but a lot of people voted no, and that has stirred debate. Even members of Congress had to BS their way and be like, well, I mean, I personally don't believe that this specific thing is good, but I believe that we need to talk about blah, blah, blah. The debate has shifted so drastically, and that's not the only issue. Here's the next one. Democrats introduced a bill to expand the Supreme Court from 9 to 13 justices. Now, I am of the belief that is a dumb idea. I don't believe that we should expand the Supreme Court. The reforms on other aspects should be done. Term limits, 100%. Every office in the United States should be term limited. But this specific thing of expanding, reforming the court, that was not possible. Nobody would even consider reforming the court. Now, reforming the court is pretty much a given. People are literally yeah, we do need to reform the court. Now, why am I against why am I against expanding the court? Well, it's very simple. You expand the court, they're gonna expand the court. Rinse, repeat. Effectively, what you're actually going to be doing is basically making another legislative branch, but these guys have a lifetime sentence. Or even though, like, many of them are actually saying, like, yeah, we should, like, introduce term limits as well. So literally you're just making another legislative branch. And also I hate this idea of, like, the whole, like, one of the things, I made a whole video about it, people are using this as, like, a way to say, like, we're trying to depoliticize the court. No, you're not. You're literally doing this because you believe that 3 justices were stolen from you. And are even trying to get a one-up by saying, like, well, we're gonna have 4 new justices. So yeah, and then, like, they're gonna be like Republicans are gonna be like, yeah, now we're gonna add 5 justices, and all of them are gonna be conservatives. And I'm sure the bill would explain, I don't know. Maybe the bill will explain, like, how do you get those 3 justices? Do we just confirm them now? Or do we just, like, or does Biden get to appoint, like, a temporary justice to serve in this role that they could then potentially get confirmed? But that's the thing, like, you don't know. We don't know. And I'm not really sure that I agree with the idea. An idea I do agree with is something that the Biden administration has decided he's going to do. Biden to announce withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan by September 11th. Now, of course, I need to preface it with this. You gotta, like, we don't know if he really is. You gotta wait till it happens. Now, do I believe he will do it? Well, you see, the thing is, I mean, you see, progressives have been kind of holding his feet to the fire at the moment. They have, like, for all those people who claim not, they have. When Biden says a bad thing, the progressives will literally be like, dude, what the F, bro? Why are you doing this? This is stupid. You could argue them saying this is stupid is a little bit less than what they probably should be doing and saying, here's a bill that we're going to introduce to try and stop that, which is fine. But they are holding his feet to the fire and are trying to hold him accountable. You could argue maybe they're not doing it as hard as they should be. Fine. But I do believe that this probably is a bit too much for them to be like, oh, we'll overlook it this one time. No, this seems like something too big for them to literally be like, especially considering progressives literally, they were like, all right, you want to do it? Fine, let's do it. Now, another reason that I believe that he has a likelihood of doing this is not because of his record, obviously not, but because of this. He actually delayed the amount of time the troopers, the troopers were actually slated to leave next month, May. Like, Trump had stated that he was going to have a May 1st deadline, and the troops are going to come home. Biden has delayed it to September 11th. So I would assume that this time period is so that he can, like, negotiate and try to figure out what the hell he wants to do in regards to his Afghanistan policy. Like, basically, like, give other groups enough time in the area to basically be like, yeah, we're not going to have U.S. troops to back us anymore, so let's try and figure out our solution. And Biden will, of course, try to negotiate with them to see what they can do. There's a huge likelihood that he will try to, like, exchange it with drone warfare. That'll, like, probably be a bit more common, which is screwed up, but that's probably something that's going to end up happening. And the last reason why I think this is likely is because of who Biden is. Biden's whole presidency, he's trying to be the anti-Trump. You know, Trump makes foreign policy decisions on Twitter. Trump doesn't think and doesn't consult generals and blah, blah, blah. He's going to use this opportunity of these negotiations and the delay to basically try to antithesize himself with Trump. And, of course, with the added bonus of him doing it on the 20th anniversary of the deployment of troopers in the Afghanistan war. I could see him standing on the stage right now going, I know, guys, 20 years ago today, we had a very tragic story. Planes flew into our towers, and I believe that after all this time, we have enough time to heal and grow as a nation. Now, previous presidents might have tried to make it so that we, don't do this without thinking clearly, but I've consulted with our generals, I've consulted with Kamala, I've consulted with our allies in the area, and I believe it's the best decision for all of us to bring our boys home. They've served our nation well, and it's time for them to be reunited with their families in these trying times. Thank you, America. This is just too big of an opportunity for him to milk this just to get the I'm better than Trump points. This is too much for him to milk. If it doesn't happen, he doesn't know what he's thinking. If this legitimately doesn't happen, Biden is dumb. I think even Democratic strategists, who many people have notoriously stated that they are not that well, thought in the head, even they are probably thinking like, bro, this is too much for you to pass up, bro. Too much. So yeah, again, we gotta wait till it actually happens before we can fully state whether or not he's doing it or not. But I'll just say it, if he does, he automatically wins over Trump. Like, I mean, there's not much else he can do that will be a stark contrast to Trump. Trump did the fake, I'll withdraw troops and then kept them in. If Biden actually pulls out troops, then he automatically wins over Trump. His COVID response is better than Trump's, but that wasn't enough to be like, pull him out and they'll be like the super bad, not bad, what am I saying? Like, this will basically win them over. So yeah, now on to the main topic of this video. Down in the heart of the United States, North Carolina, more specifically, our Senate race in 2022. Now, North Carolina is a well-known swing state. It flips every so often. This Senate seat was actually the seat that John Edwards held before Richard Burr ran and won 3 terms in the seat. But Richard Burr does not want to run in the current election. He's retiring, thus opening the door for Democrats to try and take the seat. And as is always the case with North Carolina, it is near the top of the list for Democrats to try and win the Senate back. You may remember our other Senate seat was also in a similar category, but that didn't quite pan out. And North Carolina Dems are really trying to think over what the heck they want to do with any of this. Like, will this be the time for Democrats to take the Senate back? Or will this seat inevitably not work? Now, the best way to analyze this is simple. Look over the candidates. We're going to look over them all. The potentials, the declines, the ones who are currently running, the ones who are about to run, and not just Democrats and Republicans, but also the rest of the sphere. See how everything is playing out. And we're basically going to look at the whole race and see how things are holding up. Okay, so first we're going to start off with the third-party people. There's only one third-party candidate that is declared, and that is Shannon Bray of the Libertarian Party, who ran for the seat in 2020, who many people looked at to basically see hey, will he help Cal Cunningham win, or will he draw votes away from Cal Cunningham, etc., etc.? He follows me on Twitter, but there really isn't much to say. We don't know how he's going to play out. He didn't even do that well the last time. He did the decent libertarian level, but he didn't do, exceptionally well. Now, there is another independent candidate that is running, but I'm going to have to put that on hold before, after I talk about the Republicans, because the Republicans are sort of the ones who are trying to keep the seat. They are the ones who are trying to keep the seat to themselves, and we're currently going to have a decent fight for the Republican nomination. Burr, of course, said no. Mark Meadows, the White House Chief of Staff, who used to be a member of the House of Representatives, said no. He was Trump's biggest supporter. We have some potential contenders in George Holding, a former representative from NCO2, whose seat was gerrymandered away from him. There's Tim Moore, the Speaker of the NC House, he's not well known, but you may remember a certain bill that he led. He was the original sponsor of HB2, the infamous transgender bathroom bill. The chair of the NC Republican Party, Michael Whatley, has also stated that they could potentially run, but there are also 3 people who have publicly expressed their interest to run. The current Lieutenant Governor, Mark Robinson, Ted Budd, a current representative from NC-13, but the most infamous one that has slated they are interested in running for the seat is Laura Trump. She is very seriously in the contention of running. That polls have been done, and of all of the polls running, the only poll that does not have her winning is the one poll that does not have her as an option, because she's not currently running, and that's going to pose a problem for the North Carolina Republicans, because much like the National Republican Party, the North Carolina Republican Party is sort of in that field of like, we're not the Trump cult, but also we are the Trump cult, and blah blah blah. In fact, it's so bad that a person who worked for Richard Burr, Kimry Reinhart, has stated that she wants to run a candidacy as an independent candidate because she cannot consider herself a Republican given all of this QAnon stuff and the diehard Trump cultist stuff that is going on in the National Republican Party. Now, that kind of bid does seem a bit scary if you're trying to hold a seat back. So, Republicans aren't exactly sure what to do. In fact, there are only 2 people who have even declared that they intend to run, and just by the declared candidates, you can see that this is clearly the dynamic. Mark Walker, the former U.S. representative from NCO6, who also got a seat gerrymandered away from him, he is basically running as the Trump Republican. You're like, I love Trump, I'm a diehard Trump fan, blah, 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 blah. And is kind of running as like that newfangled, new conservative type. He's got the endorsement of Madison Cawthorn, who I actually was thinking maybe he might run, but nah, apparently not. And he made it known that he was like one of the earliest Republicans to even announce that his candidacy in the nationwide level, because he's trying to build that national like coalition, get the Trumpites to back him, as opposed to waiting for an actual Trump to do it. But a very interesting thing is occurring with the person who's running against Walker. You see, Walker's, he represents the Trumpism, so who the heck is going to represent the anti-Trumpism? Well, the answer is simple. Pat McCrory, the former governor of North Carolina, who is known for signing that famous HB 2. And who's also famous for getting, narrowly defeated against Roy Cooper. Going into office, Pat McCrory ran decently well, but he lost a pretty a shorter margin. He got 48.8% against Roy Cooper's 49%. A very small margin, but it's very clear based on how Pat has kind of disappeared during the Trump administration pretty much, that he's trying to run as a sort of anti-Trump Republican. But not even explicitly anti-Trump. You see, I think he's trying to do a strategy that's going to be commonplace in 2024, as sort of Tim Scott strategy. I'm not explicitly pro-Trump, I'm not explicitly anti-Trump. Conservatives are going to like him doing HB2, but they're also not going to be super keen on him regretting him saying maybe giving a slight criticism of Trump administration pretty much. And I think that he's going to have the backing of say Tom Tillis. Tom Tillis is probably going to back McCrory over Walker or even Trump girl. But yeah, let's say Trump girl runs. She's more than likely going to win. If anybody has a chance to beat her, it would probably be Pat. But even then, I don't even think Pat would probably win the Senate race. Now on to the Democratic side. The side with a lot more to lose. Actually, not even a lot more to lose, a lot more to gain. As you remember, the last election cycle, Cal Cunningham was considered the safe choice. Hey, we don't need to rock the boat too much. We don't need a dynamic candidate. We don't need a candidate that is going to do all these things. What we need is a guy who is safe, who is nice, who is moderate, who can get us to the Senate majority. And then Cal literally did everything except that. I believe that Cal Cunningham would have lost either way, even if he didn't cheat on his wife. That 100% didn't help him in any stretch of the word, but he didn't, that's not the sole reason he lost. It's a primary reason, but not the sole reason. He just was nothing. And that's the problem. A lot of people, they think the nobody candidates are the safest bets. They're not. They want a candidate that is cool. North Carolina, we had Terry Sanford. He was cool. He was nice. And even in the modern day, John Edwards had some sort of small populist charm. Kay Hagan, she was a woman who had the Southern woman style. Like, but the thing is, we keep nominating the not safe, the safe choices, and they don't really turn out well. So Democrats in North Carolina have been trying to figure out, like, what's the problem? And there's one individual that they actually look towards for sort of guidance, Roy Cooper. Because Roy Cooper, if you haven't noticed, is one of the only, like, statewide Democrats to hold a position of power. He's literally in the highest office of the state. Like, a state that does typically, like, flip a lot. Their leader is a Democrat, especially in an era where the Democrats didn't do so well in down-the-ballot races. So, what the heck happened? Like, North Carolina didn't vote for Biden, they didn't vote for Cal, but they voted for Roy. And they were thinking, maybe Roy, maybe you should try and work that magic for us in the Senate? You know, try to get him to run for this seat. But you see, Roy has stated that he does not want to run. And even I was thinking, like, I mean, having a guy who's a statewide Democrat probably doesn't sound like a bad idea for a Senate candidate. He's definitely not my first choice, but hey, I mean, that's a better place to start than nothing. But Roy Cooper has stated that he does not want to run for Senate. And I like the way that he said it, because the way he said it, it just came off as, like, so weird. Like, Roy Cooper, the way he explained that he wanted to, like him running for Senate, he explained it in a way that was literally like, oh, I'm so confident that I will win the Senate race that I legitimately cannot run, because if I run and win, I mean, when I win, I will then have to give up the governorship to Mark Robinson, our Republican lieutenant governor, who has been accused of being an anti-Semite and being homophobic and such. North Carolina does not need to go back to the Stone Age. Let's try and move forward, and I'll keep my promise of a 4-year term. Now, is that exaggeration? Very, very likely. But, you know, confidence does scream like, that seems cool. I mean, I think that he could have made it. Like, I legitimately think that he could have won, maybe. But like, he's not the only statewide Democrat that they've tried to get to. Josh Stein is another statewide Democrat. He's the Attorney General. So, and he's one of those guys that they've eyed to basically be like, this guy's going places. We don't know where, but he's going places. He's either going to be in the Senate, or he's going to be governor, or he's going to be something. We don't know what. Keep an eye on him. But he is sort of still in the potential category. Other potentials are actually not the ones you would think. And it does kind of show a testament of North Carolina a bit. Okay, so we got Greer Martin, who's a white guy. But then all the other ones, we have like Cindy Batch, a girl. Anita Earls, a girl. Anthony Fox, a person of color. Joan Higginbotham, she's a former NASA astronaut. V. Lyles and Deborah Ross. Those guys, they're all women. Like, a majority of them are women. And if they're not women, they're people of a minority group. And our potentials aren't the only ones where we see a lot of this dynamics. Like, the people who are in the realm of actually running or are running, they are actually a very diverse group of people. First, let's start with a person who's publicly expressed that they want to run. Heath Shuler, a former U.S. representative from North Carolina District 11. He is a blue dog. I mean, a white blue dog. And is not really a favorite of mine. I mean, I don't even think he's really in a good position to run for this seat. He's pretty much been a nothing for a while. The closest thing people might have is that they might remember him as a sports star, not as an actual member of the U.S. legislature. I don't think he'd do well, and personally, I think he's really just doing this as a setup for like him to run for something else. Maybe he might be like, oh, I'll run against Madison Cawthorn, I'll try and take him down. One person who's actually slated to announce this month, but has not announced yet, is Cherry Beasley, the former Chief Justice of the NC Superior Court. Now, she's an African-American woman. That would be very interesting to see as our senator. You know, that would be cool. Now, she's notable in the sense that she lost a very close vote. It was a 411 vote difference between her and the person who ended up winning the seat. And she is actually slated to be doing really well. That notoriety has gotten her to be basically tied for first place in NC polling. But now that leaves us with the 4 people who actually intend on running. They are currently on the boots right now running. First, we'll start off with Rhett Newton, the mayor of Beaufort. I'll be honest, there really is not much information about him. He's the mayor of Beaufort. That's it. He's got a platform that seems average, really. It was very weird that this guy even decided to run. It's really weird. I mean, like, literally at this point, I'll even just be upfront. As soon as a certain individual announced that they were running, the race should have been over. Like, I mean, maybe Cherry Beasley, to be fair, she at least has some credence to run. But aside from her and this other individual who she's tied with, there really wasn't any point in adding another voice to the pot. Now, another individual that is running is Richard L. Watkins III. He was an individual who ran for North Carolina District 4 in 2018 as a brand new Congress-endorsed candidate, running a progressive primary bid against David Price, an individual who has been in Congress longer than I have been alive. Now, Richard would be notable for North Carolina for a number of reasons, and by that I mean 1. Maybe 2, but probably only 1. He would be North Carolina's first black senator. He's also a very progressive candidate for the race, Medicare for all. He's even running on a certain platform plan called SHOES, Safety, Health, Opportunity, Equity, and Solutions. And while most of that is kind of vague in a sense, protect your loved ones, create jobs, ending inequalities, a better tomorrow cannot be achieved with conventional leadership. We need bold action, bold policy. The health option, he does make explicitly clear with one aspect. He says we believe and we need Medicare for all. So yeah, that's definitely the crowd Richard's trying to reach. He's going with the more left-leaning crowd of North Carolina, but it's also kind of like, he's not really saying like, oh, I'm a progressive candidate, or I'm a moderate candidate. But he's saying, like, he's letting his ideas speak for him. Seeing how people play out and such. But the way the primary is building right now, it's really kind of being seen as like a 2-person race. And much like the last one, we actually have a returning contender. Erica Smith, who ran for the Senate seat in 2020. And who I'm unfortunately seeing a lot of people in my circles give credence to. I don't trust her for a second, and I should probably reform my thread so that I can explain it better, because the way that my thread is explained now, it's kind of all over the place. But basically, I do not trust Erica Smith in the slightest, because I know who she is. I've seen her running for candidacy before. The difference between me and a lot of these other individuals is that a lot of these people don't know Erica Smith, the candidate in 2020. They know Erica Smith, the candidate in 2022. And a lot of them didn't even bother to ask me, my inference, maybe because they don't even know I live in North Carolina. But I happen to know a lot about this state's primary process and have been very vocal about that primary process. That was legitimately just like, come on, dude, really? Erica, she keeps trying to tout herself as the progressive alternative to whoever is the main option, the safe choice. Last one being Cal Cunningham, and in this one, we'll get to that when we get to that. But she's basically always tried to pin herself as the progressive candidate as opposed to whoever is the one currently in power. The problem is, she does not actually live up to those expectations. You see, Erica Smith, the biggest contender of this issue, is her flipping stance on Medicare for all. And that was the big thing that I kept bringing up. I've talked about it in previous podcast appearances. I've talked about this in previous shows. She never point blank ever talked about Medicare for all on the campaign trail unless she needed to. But every time she didn't need to, she would not say a peep. Here's one of a screen cap of a post that she deleted. She states, Delaney is right. rural hospitals cannot survive on Medicare/Medicaid billing, which is her trying to jump on the John Delaney thing of oh, yeah, Medicare for all won't work because blah, 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 blah. And throughout the campaign, here was her tweets in regards to healthcare. I believe in equitable access to healthcare. Tom Tillis is suing to take away your healthcare. We believe in affordable healthcare to all Americans. Let's take what's working, expand on it, protect pre-existing condition clause. We can increase access to affordable healthcare. We need to provide equitable access to healthcare for all Americans. She, never explicitly talked about Medicare for all in a lot of her actual campaign rhetoric. She would name drop the Green New Deal, but Medicare for all just so happened to be an issue that she never really talked about that much. And there were only 2 points where she ever talked about Medicare for all during her campaign for Senate. Quote unquote, here is the only 2 tweets that she made during the 2020 election that she name-dropped Medicare for all. July 30th, 2019. Can we move beyond speaking points? Medicare for all, public option, prescription drug price controls. Big insurance companies do not have a God-given right to earn $23 billion in profit from treating sick people and suck it out of the system. Hashtag what Warren said. And on January 14th, 2020, the Improved Medicare for All Act of 2019 has a 5-year transition for displaced insurance workers. Thanks for pointing that out, Bernie Sanders. Now, I could be completely wrong in my interpretation of that, but the way that reads out, and especially considering the way that the debate is framed, they sort of make it seem like that was a jab at Bernie. Yeah, bro, yeah, you have a 5-year transition period. You get you don't really care about healthcare. Stuff like that. And another thing was that Erica Smith was apparently rated the most conservative Democrat by Civitas Action. In 2017, she had a 100% rating from Grassroots NC, an arch conservative gun group. She supported the death penalty. And back to Medicare for all, again, she never really went full on Medicare for all until very late in the game. And it's funny, Erica Smith has actually tried to correct me on this. When I called her out, she said, in my last race and this one, I've supported Representative Jayapal's proposal for Medicare for all. The efforts to paint me as a fake progressive are from those who are afraid of what we'll accomplish in a diverse, progressive working class coalition. And I responded with this. In this article, you stated, quote, you do not fall solely on either side of the Medicare for all debate, and then later state that you would only support Medicare for all, quote, if it were the only option presented. On the Young Turks, you frequently talked about access to healthcare, and Cenk Uygur, I believe, literally point blank asks her, do you support Medicare for all?
Equitable healthcare. Everyone should have access to free health care. And I have to go on about this because you and I, we go to work, we work hard every day, we pay our taxes so that 435 members of the House will have good insurance. We go to work, we pay our taxes so 100 U.S. senators can have good access to health care. So if we go to work every day and we pay our taxes so that they can have good health care, why can't they go to work to fight for every American to have access to universal health care with prescription drug controls and to make sure that people are not rationing their insulin so that they can put food on the table?
Access, access, access. That means nothing. The way you worded that was so incredibly vague, that means literally nothing. Now I get having the idea of let's do at the short term we do this, then on the long term we do this. But she basically said everything in regards to healthcare. I believe everybody should have access to affordable, universal, free healthcare. I believe everybody needs the access to that. No, you for it or against it? Tell me which one. Especially considering her form of healthcare was never called universal healthcare. As she said in that clip, it was equitable. That's her thing. Equitable healthcare. That was her brand. She mentioned equitable healthcare all the time during the campaign trail because it's vague enough for anybody to believe that they're for it or against it. In fact, here was her healthcare website for a majority of the 2020 campaign. Equitable healthcare. North Carolina and Congress has a duty to our citizens to provide access to healthcare, whether long-term care and assisted living for senior citizens through Medicare or by expanding Medicaid for those who struggle and cannot afford access. According to a recent health insurance org study, NC's failure to expand Medicaid has resulted in denied coverage for over 800,000 eligible patients, rejecting approximately $40 billion over the next decade, a denial of over 40,000 healthcare jobs that could be created, and likely more than 1,000 deaths per year due to lack of access to care. Our citizens pay taxes that fund Medicaid expansion in other states. This is not right, and we can do better than this. That was her healthcare stance for basically the entire campaign. And I kept asking her point blank, you going to support Medicare for all or not? In the time it took for her to announce her support for healthcare, like Medicare for all, the race was over. I had already casted my vote. I was driving home from voting when I checked her website again, where she included a little green bubble that said improved medical care / healthcare for all. You would click that, and it would take you to a separate page where then it said, oh, I support Medicare for all. A little too late for that, buddy. By that time, Trevor Fuller had finally managed to get his website up and running and was able to point blank state, yeah, I support Medicare for all. And, unbeknownst to me, he was secretly saying that the entire time, and no one was actually telling me because he didn't have a website, and he wasn't active on Twitter. In that same interview that I brought up before, where she was saying, like, I believe in Medicare for all, if they were the only option, Trevor Fuller point blank stated, no, that's stupid. I believe in unabashed support for Medicare for all. And another thing that got people up in riles in regards to Erica Smith was that there was a controversy where she may or may not have endorsed a certain individual running for, like, against someone else. The individual in question was a conservative Republican, and there was a speculation that Erica Smith endorsed her over the Democratic incumbent, which made people question, how can you call yourself a progressive when you do that? Now, there's sort of a reason. I didn't understand it at first, but it turns out, here's the thing. The person that individual was running against is Jeff Jackson, also known as the final candidate in this race. This is the guy who is sort of the, like, for those who don't know, Jeff Jackson, state senator, I've talked about him previously on the show before. Jeff Jackson is that, like Ben Stein in that sort of regard. You know, hey, this guy's going places, we don't know where, but he's going places. The individual that you can definitely see that he's sort of like in that field of like, oh, he's definitely going to be a senator or governor or something. And Jeff is currently eyeing this Senate seat. And why that is controversial is because in the last Senate race, Jeff Jackson actually planned on running for that Senate seat. But they turned him down. He point blank went to Chuck Schumer to get his approval to run for Senate. But then Jeff Jackson was actually turned down because his campaign strategy did not align with the Democratic parties. Well, the Democratic parties. I don't know why I said Democrat parties, but like, that was like a weird, I don't know. I'm getting tired. Anyways, like the Democratic parties, like, they wanted to run a different campaign strategy than Jeff. Jeff Jackson's strategy was very simple. He wanted to run a 100 county campaign. Over the course of 100 days, he would hold 100 town halls, one in each county in North Carolina, and basically try to rile up support for him in the primaries, get people who support other candidates to support him, and basically make it so that if they don't know his name, they'll know his name for the general election, so that they can all unite against the incumbent Republican under him, get the support from all the presidential candidates, get basically a united Democratic coalition to go against, you know, Tom Tillis in the general election. Chuck Schumer responded with, no, that's not the strategy we're going for. My strategy is very simple. I want you to basically be in a windowless basement for the entirety of the primary and basically make some calls to some shady corporations to give you some campaign donations. Then, for the general election, we will then trot you out and use all that money to basically campaign very hard against your opponent and run exclusively attack ads. What do you say, Jeff? Jeff responded with, no, are you crazy? No! Well then fine, Jeff. If you're not going to do it, we're going to find someone who will. Conveniently, Cal Cunningham announced that he was going to run for Senate around that same time period. And we know this because Jeff Jackson, while he was apparently going on a tour, he actually revealed this to the students that he was talking to about political campaigns. And they leaked this information. Now, as we know, Cal Cunningham cheated on his wife, and all that work and all of that potential, like, this Jeff, this strategy is going to be better than yours. You're stupid, you're ugly, you're dumb, you're lame. He basically pointed at them and laughed because he's like, I told you this would be a stupid strategy, and look, you got egg on your face. And Jeff Jackson, while not explicitly stating it, is sort of kind of trying to make jabs at the Democratic Party for that. While, of course, trying to focus more on certain other aspects. Like his thing is he's trying to focus on a more positive campaign, especially considering he, and many people who don't know the story, both think Jeff Jackson and Cal Cunningham have very similar ideas. You know, Jeff Jackson, he's not really a radical. He's not like a progressive or moderate or anything. Like, he's just a Democrat. That's basically him. You can look at him from any angle and be like, yeah, I like him. I mean, I don't hate the guy. I don't have a reason to. He hasn't done anything that really seems to rub me the wrong way. I mean, sure, I guess he kind of capitulated because, like, after the Democrats found out that he, you know, said that stuff, he very conveniently decided, oh, hey, I'm going to endorse Jeff. I'm going to endorse Kyle Cunningham for the primary. But, like, basically this primary, he's trying to run the strategy that he wanted to do, but also do jabs. Like, in his first campaign ad, he was like, here's me, my loving wife, my loving children, my loving family, who I love very dearly, very, very much. I love them very much. They are so awesome. I love my family. I love North Carolina. You know, we're all a nice, big, happy family who are very nice and loving to each other. It's like, Jeff, you dude, I see what you're doing, man. But he's also running his, like, 100 campaign strategy. Like, he's gonna do 100 town halls in 100 days for 100 counties. Try to recapture the Terry Sanford magic. And he's not running to any particular ideological faction of the Democratic Party. He's even going so far as to say that he's trying to use this campaign strategy to build his platform. Which is kind of a bad idea because, you know, this isn't really a good idea. You should have a platform already, and that's a big problem. That's the one thing that does seem to be like, I guess he is trying to, like, appeal to be like try to be not get the Democrats to, like, shy away from helping him, but also not trying to bring them to him. Because basically it seems like he's trying to go solo with this one. Now, if you've already known my website or know me, you already know who I'm backing. I'm backing Richard L. Watkins III. And there's actually kind of a personal story why. You see, I'll be honest. Richard L. Watkins was the individual who I couldn't vote for. Basically, like, I mean, I was politically aware. I was like 17 at the time. Like, it was right before I started my show. Basically, it was in the summer, and I didn't have I wasn't old enough to vote. So I couldn't vote in the primary. And I was basically like, yo, I want to vote for, like, this guy because this guy aligns with my views 100%. Did not get to do that. So Richard L. Watkins, I was actually really excited when he announced he was going to run. But honestly, I could see myself voting for pretty much all the Democrats, honestly. Like, I mean, of all the ones that I hate Erica Smith, but I mean, I voted for Cal Cunningham in the general election, so clearly that's not going to, like, factor much in the general election. I mean, unless the Greens manage to dig someone up who's not Tamara Zwanak, then I'll be voting for the Democrat in the general election, 100%. If I'm going to be honest, I'd probably rank it so that, like, I mean, I think Jeff's probably my second choice, at least just because, I don't know. Like, I mean, I'll vote for Richard L. Watkins in the primary. Whatever happens in the general election, we'll have to find out. Like, I mean, maybe Jeff Jackson turns out to be, like, this huge conservative Democrat, and then I might be hesitant. We don't know. Either way, I could see any of these guys, if they just manage to run a decent campaign, winning. So let's see how things go. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to be notified when a future video of mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or check my articles on the Independent Political Report.